I told you he had this struggle with celibacy. He wanted to marry an English girl, and Gandhi said, you can marry her, you have my blessings, but practice brahmacharya.
My question is this, that you said that you were renewed interest in Gandhi started somewhere around 1978. And that is the exact time when Lankesh also felt so. Lankesh has written about this, that during emergency, all of them felt that Gandhi is like a weapon against the authoritarianism, and everybody is having a Gandhi photo in front of them in Satyagraha against the emergency or the authoritarianism on that day. But now you see that the constitution preamble is a sort of a weapon or the tool to protest. Why is it that Gandhi is not again such a symbol against the authoritarianism?
So, I mean, against authoritarianism per se, I mean, obviously the preamble, but if you go back to the CAA protest, Gandhi and Ambedkar were both there. No. Gandhi and Ambedkar were both there. The CAA protest, you will see the slogans, the posters held up in Delhi and other places, even in Bangalore. And also something very interesting. The day both of us the day both of us were detained was 19 December 2019. So it brought together not only Gandhi and Ambedkar, Gandhi and Bhagat Singh. So actually, I don't want to get into contemporary politics. This is a lecture about the biographer's art. But today, some of these false polarizations, some are real. Gandhi versus Savarkar is real. But if we want to resist authoritarian majoritarianism, infighting, we can draw something from Ambedkar, something from Gandhi, something from Nehru, something from Kamala Devi, something. So I think that's where I think that those CA protests are very interesting because the juxtaposition of 2 days. Anyway, that's the greatest of the collected works was in the spirit of Gandhi's commitment to truth. Everything of Gandhi is there, including the strangest, most bizarre, most peculiar, most offensive remarks he made. But he's always evolving. I mean, the moral evolution of Gandhi.
1927 27 ಬಾಬಾ ಸಾಹೇಬ್ ಬಿ ಅಂಬೇಡ್ಕರ್ ಅವರು ಮಾರ್ಚ್ ಸತ್ಯಾಗ್ರಹ ನಡೆಸ್ತಾರೆ. 1913 ಗಾಂಧೀಜಿಯವರು ಸಾಲ್ಟ್ ಮಾರ್ಚ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಸಾಲ್ಟ್ ಮಾರ್ಚ್ ಭಾಳ ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ಅಂತ ಅನಿಸಿದ ಗಾಂಧೀಜಿಗೆ ನೀರನ್ನು ಮುಟ್ಟೋ ಪರ್ಮಿಷನ್ ಇರಲಿಲ್ಲ ಇಂಡಿಯಾದಲ್ಲಿ. ನೀರಿನ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತಾಡಬೇಕಂತ ಯಾಕೆ ಗಾಂಧಿಗೆ ಅನಿಸಿರಲಿಲ್ಲ?
I think this whole mode of argument, why did he not do this? Rather, what did he do and what did others do? Do we judge his life against his time? From the perspective of 1927, what could Ambedkar do? What could Gandhi do? So this whole, what has happened? I'll tell you the background to this briefly. And we are talking a great deal about Ambedkar and Gandhi. Maybe after this we can get on to other topics. You see, there was a time when Ambedkar was written out of the narrative because he opposed Gandhi and he supported the British. It's wonderful to be in this space, a historic building refurbished and converted into a cultural center for this city. I'd like to thank Sandeep Narayan of RBNMS for inviting me. I'd also like to express the gratitude on behalf of my fellow citizens to the trustees of RBNMS, to Hema and Ravichandra for their extraordinary special gift to the city. And it's the first time I'm speaking here, and I should note that I also have an incidental family connection to Sabha, but we can let that pass for the moment. But because it is called Sabha, some of you who've heard me speak before will notice that I'm sitting down and not bullshitting from that lectern. You will also notice as I go along that unlike when I usually speak, I don't have a sheaf of notes, typed on pages of paper. I'm just speaking spontaneously because this is a gathering. Think of it as a sabha under a banyan tree. And I'm not a guru, but I'm sharing my life experience in the form of a discourse rather than a lecture. And it's not really going to be about the life of Mahatma Gandhi, because those of you who are interested in the life, work, struggles, controversies of Gandhi, it's all here. Right. It's going to be on the life, struggles, controversies, preoccupations of Ramachandra Guha as a Gandhi biographer. So how did I get into all these years studying Gandhi? A journey which began, I would guess, 30 odd years ago and is unfinished, which to the dismay of some of my readers who would like me to return to writing on cricket, for example, this journey is going to continue till I die. It may take different forms, different shapes. So let's begin with when I became sufficiently intrigued by Gandhi. I was interested in Gandhi from my first days as a scholar. I grew up in Dehradun in a home that was more Nehruvian than Gandhian. My father was a scientist. My mother was a high school teacher with an instinctive, not an ideological, an instinctive emotional commitment to Hindu-Muslim harmony, which she retains. She lives with us. She's 97, and that she retains. And so Nehru was, of course, Gandhi had been dead. I was born 10 years after Gandhi died. And Nehru was, in a sense, the embodiment of the Gandhian spirit of Hindu-Muslim harmony, which is why Nehru appealed to my mother. And my father was a scientist. Gandhi was there in the background, but it was more Nehru. So I sort of developed a kind of, you could say, more than hazy interest in Gandhi when I discovered the works of the anthropologist Verrier Elwin, which happened in the summer of 1978, when I was doing an MA in economics and rather disenchanted with economics. And I dare I say, economics was even more disenchanted with me. When I came across Elwin's autobiography, which is called The Tribal World of Verrier Elwin, where this Oxford scholar, the son of a British bishop, describes his coming to India in his 20s, discovering Gandhi, admiring Gandhi, choosing to make his home in India, becoming the foremost anthropologist and activist for tribal people, and in the course of his journey, becoming disenchanted with Gandhi, partly because of Gandhi's twin obsessions with celibacy and prohibition. Now, prohibition, Elwin regarded as damaging to the Adivasis, for whom drink was both nutritious and part of their song and dance and so on, and celibacy he regarded as damaging to himself. And then, of course, so he was very close to Gandhi. In fact, there's a wonderful story of a talk that Gandhi gave in, this should have been in 1931, after the Salt March, when he had been released from prison. Gandhi gave a talk in Mumbai with Meera Ben, Madeline Slade, on his left, and Elwin on his right. So this enemy of the British Empire was speaking about the evils of colonialism with a young British female friend to his left and a young British male friend, or both really disciples, to his right. So he wrote some wonderful essays on Gandhi, including one comparing Gandhi and Wordsworth, which is cited in my book, Speaking with Nature. This is back in 1930, Elwin wrote this essay. But then he worked with Adivasis, found some of Gandhi's views, I think, justly problematic. And then got moved away from Gandhi and was out of touch with Gandhi for the last decade of Gandhi's life. And then Gandhi was murdered. And Elwin felt horrified by that and felt somewhat embarrassed and ashamed that he had allowed himself to be away from the nurturing influence of Gandhi. And then he came back to Gandhi, and in 1954 or 55, wrote a short book on Gandhi for an Adivasi audience. So I knew of Gandhi because of this rather complicated relationship that Elwin, who was, in a sense, the reason I got into intellectual work. After reading Elwin, I moved away from economics and decided to do a PhD in sociology and anthropology, inspired by Elwin. My doctoral research was on forests and peasants in the Himalaya, and it ended with 2 chapters on the Chipko movement, which was then very fresh and new. And working on the Chipko movement stoked a different kind of interest in Gandhi, because the main leaders of the Chipko movement, Chandi Prasad Bhatt, Radha Bhatt, and Sundarlal Bahuguna, saw themselves as Gandhians, both in their critique of large-scale destructive industrialization, in the emphasis on crafts production, village self-sufficiency, the uplift of women, and so on. So Gandhi was coming into my life. And Nehru was also there, but receding a bit. But I would say that I realized that I must take Gandhi seriously as a scholar, not incidentally as an influence on the environmentalists I had studied and the anthropologists who continued to obsess me, on whom eventually I was to write a biography, which is also there outside, my biography of Elvin called Savagely Civilized. I suspect it was in the early 90s that I realized quite how intriguing and interesting a historical figure Gandhi was. Not, just the so-called father of a nation. I was then living in Delhi. This would have been the early 90s. It was before the demolition of the Babri Masjid. It would have been about 1990 or 91, the kind of controversy had started, and the Sangh Parivar was mobilizing people to what eventually became the destruction of the Babri Masjid. And there was this bitter kind of dispute over this mosque stroke temple. And a very close friend of mine, who I had just befriended then, who continues to be a very close friend of mine, some of you know him and many of you know his work, the scholar, diplomat and civil servant Gopal Krishna Gandhi, told me this story. Sushila Nair, who was Gandhi's, very close to Gandhi, she was with him in the Aga Khan jail during Gandhi's last term. She was pretty close to Kasturba. She wrote the first biography of Kasturba. She was Gandhi's doctor. Sushila Nair was with Gandhi, walking with him in Noakhali. When all this was happening, Sushila ji, who was then in her late 70s, went to Ayodhya and started holding meetings, advocating Hindu-Muslim harmony. And at one of these meetings, this old lady was on the stage with some people, and they started singing Raghupati Raghava Rajaram, Ishwar Allah Tere Naam. When they came to Ishwar Allah, there was booing and shouting and chappals thrown on the stage. And she was disturbed and flustered, and she went up to the protesters and said in Hindi, and I suppose all of you will understand it, but I'll translate. She said, "ऐसा क्यों कर रहे हो? हम गांधी जी के तरफ से आए हैं. We have come representing Gandhi." And the protesters replied, "और हम Godse की तरफ से." Right. Now this was, we have come representing Godse. Now Gopal Gandhi told me this incident, which Sushila ji, who was an old family friend, had told him. Now, again, this is so long ago that I can't remember the exact sequence, but either just before that or probably just after that, I was reading a newspaper in Delhi, either the Times of India or the Hindustan Times, and it had a long interview which someone Arvind will know about and one or two others will know about in the audience, but most of you will not have heard the name. This was a person called Kondapalli Sitaramaiah. He was a Naxalite leader, the leader of the People's War Group in Andhra. I can see some heads nodding. Now, KS, as he was called, had been arrested and taken to hospital. He feigned illness, was taken to hospital in Hyderabad, and disappeared and went underground for several months till he was recaptured and arrested again. When he was arrested for the second time, a Telugu journalist interviewed him, and this was a translation of the Telugu journalist interview with Kondapalli Sitaramaiah that was published in a Delhi newspaper in English, because I don't read Telugu, so I read it in English. So the journalist asked the Maoist revolutionary, "When you escaped from the hospital, what did you do when you were on the run?" And he said, "I went to Porbandar." Now just calculate the distance from Hyderabad to Porbandar, about 800 miles from the Deccan right to the west coast. In those days, it would have meant train, bus, and other odd forms of transport. And he said, "I went to Porbandar. I went to Gandhi's ancestral house, which is now for many years has been a museum. And there was a Telugu word reproduced in the interview. I saw the house, I went to the veranda, and I spat on the muggu on the floor and came back." Muggu is what in Tamil is called kolam, the floral decoration showing a sacred place. So I said, what? Just look at the intense hatred of this man for Gandhi. I mean, that he travels 800 miles just to spit on the muggu outside Gandhi's ancestral birthplace. So it struck me that here is a figure who's been dead 40 odd years, and the visceral hatred on both left and right for him. That really intrigued the historian in me. that what is it about someone so long dead that he's so vilified, by right-wing radicals and left-wing radicals. So I think that in a sense could be probably the beginning of my journey towards becoming a Gandhi biographer. Now, I had worked on the Chipko movement, where kind of Gandhi's our influence was sort of manifest. I was writing on Elvin, who had this very complicated relationship with Gandhi I've told you about. And I'd also been kind of working on a social history of cricket. Now, one would not expect Gandhi to figure at all in a social history of cricket. India's two great popular passions are film and cricket. Gandhi is known to have watched one film in his life. And I think he fell asleep at the interval. And there is no record of his ever having watched a cricket match. But I was writing this social history of cricket, which is called A Corner of a Foreign Field, whose hero was a forgotten Dalit cricketer called Palwankar Balu, who was the first great Indian cricketer. He was a left-arm slow bowler on the first All India tour of England, in which the Indian team lost most matches. He was the standout success. He got 150 wickets. This is 1911. He was offered county contracts. And when he and his brother Shivaram, who also performed well on the tour, both born in Dalit homes, came back on the ship, there was a reception for them hosted by the Depressed Classes Association of Bombay. And at that speech, B.R. Ambedkar, who was then a brilliant college student, made his first public talk, which was to welcome and felicitate Balu and Shivaram. Now, it's a long and complicated story I describe in my book of his struggle. Balu struggled to be accepted. He was never made captain of the Hindu team, even if he was the best player, and so on and so forth. His younger brother Vitthal, who was an outstanding batsman, eventually became captain of the Hindu team. This was partly because of Gandhi's influence, because Gandhi had come back and started mobilizing the public of Mumbai against, and Western India against untouchability. And when the Hindus beat the Europeans in the final of what was then the leading major cricket tournament, the quadrangular, and Vitthal scored 100, he was carried off the field by people saying, Mahatma Gandhi ki jai. So I wrote this book on cricket, and I said I didn't really expect Gandhi to figure, because it was woven around. There was also other aspects to the book. There was also Hindu-Muslim rivalry played out in the cricket field, and race and colonialism and so on. And then I started compiling the index to my books. In those days, I used to compile the indexes to my own books. Now I've become too old and my books have become too long. So I get other people to do it for me. But that's the last book for which I compiled my own index. And when I did so, I found there were 40 index entries to Gandhi. I said, look at this man. When I work on the environment, he's there. When I work on Elvin and Indian anthropology, he's there. God forbid I work on cricket and this fellow's stalking me here too. So I better settle my accounts with him. Now, I wasn't really sure how I would do it. I was hesitant to write a biography to begin with, for the reason that all my previous projects had been, so to say, in untilled fields. There was no discipline of environmental history before I wrote my book, The Unquiet Woods. My biography of Elvin was the first, and deservedly I think should be the last, because Elvin probably doesn't deserve more than one book. And I was, even with the social history of cricket, I was kind of getting to a field. People had just thought cricket was fun and centuries and wickets, and the links between society and sport hadn't really struck Indian scholars, though of course scholars in England had written about soccer and British social history, and scholars in America had written about baseball and American social history. And I thought, I like being a pioneer. There are 600 or 800 or 1200 books on Gandhi. Let me do something different. So I had various ideas. First, I thought I'd do an anthology of the best essays on Gandhi. Then I thought I'd do an anthology of writings by Gandhi on the West and Western people on Gandhi. Then I thought I'd do a book on Gandhi's afterlives, drawing on these twin incidents that had so surprised and shocked me. The exaltation of Godse over Gandhi in Ayodhya, and the Naxalite leaders spitting at Gandhi's tomb. Gandhi's birthplace. So eventually I was persuaded to write a biography of Gandhi, which became a 2-volume book. And now I will not summarize the book per se, but or the books really. I'll say a little bit about the process of research and why I found it worthwhile to write a fresh biography of Gandhi, even though there'd been several hundred books written about him, rather than a thematic study of his afterlife or his attitudes towards the West or some of the other things I could have done. Now, so when I was working on Elwin, when I was working on Varian Elwin, I had the great good fortune of meeting and being mentored by a master biographer. You know, biography is a very difficult art form. It requires deep research. It requires some attention to language. But you can't make up. As has been said, a biographer is an artist under oath, unlike a novelist. Unlike my son, who can make up his dialogue of his characters as he goes along in his books, I can't make things up. So I was, I was hesitant to write a biography of Elwin because my training was in sociology, which is about aggregates: peasants, the state, workers, class, gender, and then coming from there to biography was a complicated, arduous journey. But I was determined to write on Elwin's because I was so obsessed with him. And I wrote a draft of my book and took it to Berlin, where I was a fellow at the Wissenschaftskolleg, the Institute for Advanced Studies. And one of my colleagues was the great biographer of Goethe, the great German polymath. And his name was Nicholas Boyle. So I said, will you read my draft? He read it, and every page came back with comments. He read it, it was a Cambridge Dawn reading the ill-formed, shoddy work of a Cambridge undergraduate. And he pointed out everything that was wrong with my draft, okay, page by page. And then we had a very long chat. And then he told me what was wrong with it, not, page by page, but structurally. And he taught me what I came to regard, as a nod to him, his name was Nicholas Boyle, I came to regard as Boyle's 3 laws of biography. Now, the first law was, the first law was never anticipate. If you're a sociologist, you set out your thesis. This is a book about an environmental movement. It tells you how they are, it tells you the links between state and society, and you set out a thesis, and then you, document it, then you go back. Here you never anticipate. So, for example, if Elwin, I told you he had this struggle with celibacy. He wanted to marry an English girl, and Gandhi said, you can marry her, you have my blessings, but practice brahmacharya. Now, but in my draft it said, later on he was to quarrel with Elwin and he married a tribal girl. Now, never anticipate, let the suspense build. So that's Boyle's first law of biography. The second law of biography, which is even more important, is especially if your subject is a writer, look for sources other than those emanating from your subject himself or herself. Now, Elwin wrote 40 books, 400 newspaper articles. You can tell the whole, and hundreds of letters. So you can tell he wrote to his mother, who's in England, twice a week, to his sister once a week. You can tell the whole story of his life through Elwin's voice. So look for sources other than those from your main subject himself. And the third and most important law of Boyle was a biography is only, a biography depends on how vividly and interestingly you fleshed out the secondary characters. So it's not just that you do not just follow Elwin's writings. You know, you look at Elvin's friends, his associates, his loves, his family, his rivals, his interlocutors, his influences, intellectual, cultural, political influences. And then so it's a biography is peopled by many characters. You know, not just, and the main character, it's in the main character's interaction with all these different kinds of people that he's in touch with, that he himself is fleshed out. So these were Boyle's 3 laws, to which I added a 4th. Elvin wrote a beautiful autobiography. It's called The Tribal World of Warrior Elvin. It won the Sahitya Akademi Award for English in 1964. I think it was the first work of non-fiction ever to win that award. Usually those works go to novels and sometimes to poems. And he wrote a fabulous autobiography. And when I was working on Elvin in the 80s and 90s, there were many people who had read Elvin's autobiography. You know, now it's probably out of print. I don't think anyone in this room would have read it. But I would meet friends and senior, relatives, and they'd say, "What can you add to his book? It's so exquisitely written. It tells his story in such a charming, vivid way." And then I came back when I did all my research in the archives, and I found kind of juxtaposed what I had found about Elvin's life with the way he had told his own life to Boyle's 3 laws, to repeat. Boyle's 3 laws being: do not anticipate, look for sources other than those created by your principal character, and flesh out the secondary characters. To these I added a 4th law, which is my own, Guha's addendum to Boyle's laws. An autobiography is a preemptive strike against a future biographer. Now, and then I decided I will apply these laws to Gandhi. So you have, first of all, never anticipate. I've already that's rather obvious. That's the most obvious of these laws. Gandhi wrote his own autobiography, which is a kind of a preemptive strike. It's an invitation for you to fill in the silences, iron out the ambiguities, and so on. Then, of course, there is this question of writing. There are 97 volumes of Gandhi's collected works. Okay. 90 volumes chronological, 7 volumes supplementary. Then there is volume 98, which is indexed to subjects. There is volume 99, there is indexed to persons. And the series should really have stopped at 99, except that India invented the 0. Indians love cricket and centuries. So, utterly redundant and superfluous 100th volume was added, called Prefaces to the 97 volumes. But anyway, 97 volumes is a hell of a lot, right? And it is so tempting that virtually all the studies on Gandhi, thematic, sociological, political, biographical, polemical, critical, debunking, rely massively and sometimes totally on those 97 volumes. And I knew through my research, there's much more. There's much more. There's the letters to Gandhi. And the letters to Gandhi are not there in the collected works. They're in the Sabarmati Ashram. There's 60,000 of them. And those are the letters about Gandhi in other private paper collections. The newspaper reports, the intelligence reports on Gandhi, because the British were following him for 40 years. I mean, it's an extraordinary rich range. I said, I will use all of this. And of course, there's the whole question of many more intriguing and interesting characters. So then I wrote these. Eventually, I was going to write 1 volume, and then it eventually became 2. I'll say more about volume 1, which is this one, okay, which is called Gandhi Before India, which ends with Gandhi leaving South Africa in 1914. Now, if you look at when he was 45, so more than half of his life had already been lived before he comes back to India. Now, if you look at most works on Gandhi, they very quickly go over that South African part. It's seen as a prelude, a precursor. But actually, it's much more important than that. It is the shaping of him. It's there. Now, for example, even before South Africa, he's in England. So, of course, he's. Let's begin with before England in Kathiawar. Now, a very important determining feature in Gandhi's life was the death of his father. Because if his father had not died, it's very likely he would not have gone to England, which was a radical breach of caste prejudice. Gandhi had started reading Gujarati travelogues, wanted to go to England, and was able to persuade his mother. I think we remain so patriarchal 140 years later that it's still probably easier for young children to persuade their mother than their father if they want to do something daring and risky and radical. So, okay, so that's the first interesting aspect. Then he goes to London. And in London, there's a chapter, one of my favorite chapters in my first volume is called Among the Vegetarians. Because it's life among the vegetarians in London that shapes Gandhi fundamentally in two respects. One, he discovers a cause. He discovers what it is to be part of a group, part of an organization, and many people here, likewise, who have an activist sensibility will remember the first group they joined, which discussed serious and sober issues and sought to thrash them out collectively. And it's also in London that he becomes a published writer, because he's an Indian vegetarian. So they want him to write in the Journal of the Vegetarian Society of London about what it means to be a vegetarian from India. And he writes a 6-part article. Now, at the age of 21, now a young writer, getting the opportunity to write a 6-part article. Now, will the Hindu or the Times of India or Prajavadi give a young writer that space? Now, so even his kind of training as a writer starts there. Then he comes back and he tries to establish himself as a lawyer and fails. And if he had succeeded, I would not be, as a lawyer in Mumbai, I would not be speaking to you here today. Right. So that part, and then of course you go to South Africa. And it's in South Africa that, the first early struggles, his discovery of other faiths, his cultivation of aesthetic sensibility, living on the land. And so the first part of the book, and particularly the issue of secondary characters. I mean, both volumes draw a lot on the collected works, but draw much more on things that are not published. Unpublished letters, documents, reports, secret, missives, and of course a whole array of newspaper reports on Gandhi in many languages in many, many countries. But I think the real feature of, if I was to, as a biographer, what I'm proudest of in the first volume is the development of the secondary characters. The whole array of incredibly interesting people Gandhi meets in his journey before he comes to India. So volume 2, I'm proud of volume 2 too. It's 1,000 pages. But many of the characters in his audience, important you know about, So you know Patel, you know his main disciples, Patel, Nehru, Rajaji. You know his disciples turned critic like Bose. You know about adversaries like Jinnah and Ambedkar. I think I've said new things about all of them. I have also brought in other characters who are not so well known in his life. The real hero of volume 2 is Mahadev Desai, Gandhi's secretary, who was much more important to Gandhi than Nehru, Patel, and Rajaji and everyone else combined. But volume 1 has characters who were so important in Gandhi's life that they are unknown, or virtually unknown, and biographers have glossed over them. And I'll just give you a few examples. 2 Western women. Now, Gandhi was, as I've already indicated, something of a patriarch, to put it mildly. Yet, this patriarch was instrumental in having a woman elected as president of the Indian National Congress 100 years ago, this year 1925, at a time in which there were no women in leadership positions in any political party anywhere in the world. Sarojini Naidu was president of the Indian National Congress when there were no women who were Democratic senators or Republican senators or congressmen, not even chairperson of the, some small county party in California. Gandhi was a patriarch, but many more women joined the freedom struggle, the Indian freedom struggle, then the Chinese freedom struggle, the Russian freedom struggle, etc., etc. And his attitude towards women, his respect for women's agency, came through Western women. 2 individuals, Millie Pollack, who was the wife of his best friend Henry Pollack, and they shared a home, the Gandhis and the Pollacks, and Sonia Schlesien, who was his intrepid, courageous Jewish secretary. 2 individual women, and and also women collectively, because on 2 journeys to London in 1906 and 1909 from South Africa, pleading the case of the Indian diaspora to the imperial authorities, Gandhi saw the women suffragettes on the streets protesting for the right to vote. Right. So South Africa is crucial in that respect. South Africa is also crucial because of Hindu-Muslim harmony. Now, growing up in India, I mean, Gandhi talks in his autobiography of Sheikh Mehtab, who's kind of a bad guy because he makes him eat meat and so on, right? Now, but Sheikh Mehtab also figures in a very interesting way in my first volume. He actually joins Gandhi's struggle in 1910 in South Africa and goes to jail. I mean, you won't find that in Gandhi's autobiography. But the other Muslims who are really important in his life are, of course, his first host, Dada Abdullah. Now, if you just think, Gandhi goes to South Africa in 1893 when he fails at the bar in Bombay, and he is rescued by this invitation to settle a dispute between 2 cousins fighting. So I hope Arvind and Sanjeev will not fight about the legacy of RBI and MS. Let other business families carry on their fights. That's fine. So here is this 2 cousins fighting, and they need a lawyer who knows Gujarati and the English law, because the dispute is legal, but the correspondence is in Gujarati. So by that accident he goes there, and he takes a ship from Mumbai, lands in Durban, is met by Dada Abdullah and taken to Dada Abdullah's house. Now, was absolutely inconceivable in any town in India, even in Mumbai, for a Hindu and Muslim friends, 2 friends, one Hindu, one Muslim, then to actually stay under the same roof. Then he starts his organization. His first patron was a Parsi Rustamji. Then the movement, the first Satyagraha begins. When the first Satyagraha begins in 1907, 1908, the initial volunteers were Gujarati Hindus because they were inspired by this other Gujarati Hindu leader. But after some time, the Gujarati Hindu merchant said, "Ek baar ho gaya, now we're not going to jail again." And then the Satyagraha is rescued by a man called Ahmad Kachalia, who's a Muslim. And incidentally, that's a separate story, Kachalia's children joined the anti-apartheid struggle, and both were close friends of Nelson Mandela, but that's a separate question. So he realizes, and then at this stage, the Satyagraha is mostly, Kachalia was also a merchant, moderately, not prosperous, but moderately well-to-do merchant. In the second wave of the Satyagraha, it is Tamils who are the main activists and bulwark. So Gandhi understands the religious and linguistic pluralism of India. The idea that India does not belong to Hindus alone and India is more than Gujaratis alone comes from South Africa. And then the cast of characters. I mean, I spoke about Pollack. I didn't say much about, I spoke of Pollack's wife, Millie. But Pollack and Kallenbach, 2 Jews, are sort of like his Patel and Nehru, you could say. So the cast of, and all kinds of other people, you'll see if you read the book. So I'm glad I made it 2 volumes. Sometimes I wonder if I should have made it 3. Not in terms of adding stuff, right? But in breaking this up into 2 volumes. So because this is more than 1,000 pages, this is called Gandhi Before India, which is, as you know, a nod to my book India After Gandhi. My wife thought that the title was too clever and too self-referential, and I should have called it something else. And well, maybe she has a point, I'm not sure. But this book, right? I thought at one stage I should make it 2 volumes. So Gandhi Before India starts with his birth and ends with starts with his birth in 1869 and ends with his leaving South Africa in July 1914. This begins there and ends with his death. I thought that maybe I should break it up into 2. I would call, so first volume is Gandhi Before India. Second volume I would call Gandhi Against the Raj, which would run from 1915 till the Salt March. And volume 3 I would call the last years of Mahatma Gandhi from 1930 to 1948. Eventually I was persuaded to put it in 1 volume because I think one friend told me, one friend whose advice I valued said, the denouement of the martyrdom and the assassination, you can't leave it in the 3rd volume. You have to, the whole arc. Anyway, So that is the story of these two volumes. Can I go on for about 10, 15 minutes? Yeah, okay. Now, so they were published, they are all out there. But my journey with Gandhi has not ended. But before I tell you about the kinds of things I want to do with Gandhi, around Gandhi, indeed have done with Gandhi, around Gandhi, let me say a little bit about what happens to a biographer after he or she has written a biography which gets decent reviews. After you're known as a biographer, what happens? Now, Elvin and Gandhi were both dead. They chose me, but they were both dead. I mean, I chose them too. I mean, I returned their invitation, you could say. But they chose me. Now, what happens if what happens is, if you are known as a biographer who has written some reasonably well, shall we say, well-received books, you get unsolicited requests to write biographies of people. And I'll say a little bit about the kinds of requests I've got from my experience as a biographer. So this began with Elvin. My book on Elvin came out in 1999, in March 1999. Some months later, I got a call from a librarian in Delhi. I knew a little bit, a good librarian in Delhi, of an institution, well-known library in Delhi. And he called me in Bangalore and he said, I think the conversation was mostly in Hindi, Hindustani, but I'll reproduce in English. He said, your biography of Elvin is getting very good reviews. We are so happy. And his happiness was sincere. And he said, there's a proposal for you to consider. Why don't you write a biography of our Prime Minister, Atal Bihari Vajpayee? Now, this was a real he was the carrier of this invitation. Incidentally, his name was Kaul. And the name Kaul means something in the life of Vajpayee. Means a great deal. If you don't know about it, read Abhishek Chaudhary's terrific 2-volume biography of Vajpayee that is now here. Right? Should I give a hint or I won't give let it be. Let it be. All right. So obviously there was a collection, and he was probably in the English language. I mean, Vajpayee, he was a poet himself, so he knew something about Hindi literature. But in the larger circle of Vajpayee's family and friends, Dr. Kaul, the librarian who called me, was the most well versed with the English language world. So he was asked to approach me. And he said, why don't you do this? And then he said, it'll do very well. Every government department will order a copy. There'll be a print run, first print run of 10,000, 20,000. And fortunately, I grew up in North India, and I knew and I actually was born and raised in what was then the state of Uttar Pradesh. Is no longer, that part is no longer Uttar Pradesh. And there is I do something about how you say no politely in the Lucknowi manner. Not in the Gorakhpur manner, in the Lucknowi manner. So I said, देखिए साहब, कौल साहब ऐसा है, हाँ वो ठीक है, मैंने जीवनी लिखी है, वो अच्छे उसकी लोग तारीफ कर रहे हैं उसकी, लेकिन वो एक छोटा मोटा मिशनरी टाइप का पादरी था, मैं प्रधानमंत्री की जीवनी मैं कैसे लिखूंगा? Right. So that was the first intriguing offer I got, which was easy to refuse. Then there were various others. A recently retired test cricketer in Bangalore wanted me to write his biography. That was even easier to refuse. Then a famous scientist in Bangalore wanted me to write his biography. So all that was quite easy. But there were a couple of biographies I wanted to write, which I couldn't. One was of the great British historian E.P. Thompson, who was a profound influence on my life, intellectually and also personally, because I met him a couple of years before he died. And he and the Frenchman Marc Bloch were the two most influential historians of the 20th century. And he had a very interesting life. His father lived in India. He was himself in the peace movement. So I was keen to write his biography, till I found from his daughter that after he died in 1993, his papers were in the Bodleian Library in Oxford, but they had been closed for 50 years after his death. So obviously, it was not possible for me to write about him without access to his papers. I mean, one can speculate as to why They were closed, but they were closed. So I couldn't write because I wanted to write about someone who was not Indian. Right. That would have been an intellectual challenge for me. Then I also had another idea. I thought I'd write about someone. I've written about these males, Palwankar Balu, very relevant, Mahatma Gandhi. Let me write about an interesting woman. And I was very intrigued by the writer and broadcaster Atiya Hussain, who wrote one classic novel, Sunlight on the Broken Column, who was a legendary beauty. In fact, George Bernard Shaw is supposed to have told someone who was visiting India, a friend, he said, there are two people you must see, Gandhi for his greatness and Atiya Hussain for her beauty. She grew up in Lucknow and then of course moved to England, always identified with India. Her husband moved to Pakistan, she did not move with him. She was became a broadcaster on the BBC in the Urdu service, but then because she was an Indian, not a Pakistani, she lost her job. I did a very interesting life, and of course I knew Lucknow because of UP, I know London, and I wanted to write about her, and I found that her diaries were there. She had kept diaries for 50 years of her life. But her children, they had two children, I was not able to persuade them to give access to those diaries. So they were commissions I refused, easily refused, and there were ideas I had which I could never activate. Now the most curious commission I received, I'll tell you about, and then I'll make a few concluding remarks. So when this book came out, Gandhi Before India, in 2013, shortly afterwards, I gave a talk about the book at a literary festival in Mumbai. And as I ended and I came out, I was going, and a young man came to me and said, I have something very important to talk to you about. Can we have a few minutes? So I said, which is what I was going to the airport to catch my flight. I said, here's my email address, write to me. My email address is, and I generally reply to all my emails myself. I don't have a secretary, write to me. So a few days later, a letter came from this gentleman, young gentleman, in his probably late 30s, early 40s, saying, I work in a consultancy, and one of my clients is Mr. Gautam Adani. Now this was November or December 2013. And we've been very impressed by your book on Gandhi and your other books. And Mr. Adani would like to have a conversation with you about writing a biography, about writing his biography. Now in December 2013, we knew where Adani was going and we knew where his patron was going. So he clearly, we knew not how much the rise would be and what would it, all the darker elements, but we knew. This guy is going to become something big, right? So the letter came into my inbox, and I actually got a part-time secretary. I had to write a kind of polite letter of regret saying I'm working on the second volume of Gandhi biography. But before I did, I sent it to a few friends. This letter, for this commission to write this book. And I sent to a couple of friends, and one of them, the late great public servant Keshav Desi Raju, all my friends wrote some interesting, said there's one very good reason for you to accept this commission. You can then, after you fulfilled it, write your memoirs and entitle it Adani After Gandhi, A Biographer's Journey. Okay. Now, so that was that. However, I had still, among the reasons I turned down all these different commissions, one or two were quite interesting actually, but I said Thompson, and there was also the various other things, because I still had accounts to settle with Gandhi. So I have finished a book which will come out next year, which is called Arguments with Gandhi. So my biography is chronological. It's a narrative of his life, his struggles, his friends, his rivals, his loves, his anxieties, his achievements, his failures, etc. And it follows, following Boyle's first law, never anticipate, it follows a strict chronological line. So Arguments with Gandhi is about arguments that Gandhi had in his lifetime and afterwards, like Kondapalli Sitaramaya, spitting on the 40 years after his death, around themes like non-violence, religion, gender, caste, technology, and so on and so forth. So that is one book that is done, that will come out next year. I am also working on a book that I've made substantial progress with, called, I won't reveal the title, but it's in the making of the collected works. Now, this is an absolutely staggering project. Gandhi wrote so much in 3 languages all over. And how the government of India carried it out, because there is no equivalent anywhere in the world. It's meticulously edited. And I was able to trace the records of how it started. The 2 main movers of the project were Jawaharlal Nehru and Gandhi's youngest son, Devdas Gandhi, but then how they got the group of editors, how the editors assembled the team, where they sourced the stuff from. If you look at the volumes, they're utterly fascinating. I mean, the prefaces, which have a volume by themselves, are the least interesting. But how they annotated, what kind of footnotes, and how things are glossed and explained. The scaffolding, the appendices, the chronology, the choice of photographs. And above all, how the material was collected, collated, translated, and authoritatively attributed to Gandhi. So there is a, arguments with Gandhi, which is done, which will be a kind of, I hope, a book anyone can read, a book on the making of the collected works, which is more for specialists. And if I live long enough, there'll be at least 1 more, possibly 2, and perhaps even 3 more books with Gandhi. Thank you very much.
ನನ್ನ ಫೇವರೇಟ್ ನಂದಿನಿ ಚೀಸ್.
ಈಗ ಎಲ್ಲರ ಫೇವರೇಟ್ ನಂದಿನಿ ಚೀಸ್.
Thanks, Ram, as ever, for your description of your engagement with somebody you described as endlessly fascinating. That's a description I remember you giving of Gandhi. And because of the opportunity presented by this conversation, I actually went back to volume 1, which I'd actually read earlier, and volume 2, which I dipped into. That's my engagement with your 2 volumes. And I think what you described is really an invitation to go back, if you haven't, to both volume 1 and volume 2 for a range of reasons. I'll just mention a couple of reasons why I thought volume 1 was very fascinating from my point of view. One is, Ram described actually the friendships which Gandhi formed with people who were very different from him. Again, the milieu is invoked really beautifully, where you have this young man from a small town in Gujarat who lands up in South Africa. And again, think of it, right? I mean, think of a range of our techies who end up going to the US. And we know a range of them. Who are their friends? The Bengalis hang out with the Bengalis, the South Indians they hang out with the South Indians, etc. Right? And the description which you get here is Gandhi lands up in South Africa, and his friends are not necessarily his people he works with would have been the Gujaratis, would have been the Tamilians, but his friends are all people from different cultures. The friends who are Jewish, the friends who are from the civilization he critiques his whole life. Right? Again, that's a capacity. What Ram describes it beautifully is a certain, how do you cultivate in yourself a certain capacity for friendship? And what is it to cultivate a capacity for friendship? And the description you get, again, these are points which, again, we know Gandhi as the Mahatma. You might not know that here is an exemplar of how you build a friendship with someone you completely disagree with intellectually. And I thought that's a lesson for maybe all of us at even more polarized times, where it's very difficult. Often we have today the culture of cancellation, where Gandhi was the exact opposite. You're saying that, I completely disagree with you, but I will engage with you fully, be it Ambedkar, be it Tagore, be it a range of figures, and be it a range of these figures. You engage with them very deeply. So there's first, and fundamentally, I think the book communicates, volume 1, the incredible capacity for friendship which Gandhi had. The second point which I got again coming from my own background in terms of looking at the law more closely, is the development of his thinking on law. It it was forged really in South Africa, where you have this really difficult situation where you're advocating for the rights of a minority who doesn't belong to that particular soil, but a minority nonetheless, who are being persecuted by racial laws. That is, you think of what this comes across quite powerfully are the pass laws. That is, you go somewhere, you don't have a pass with you, you're liable to be prosecuted. And Gandhi's articulation of that is in terms of a violation of your fundamental dignity as a human being. And the third point which you get, and of course, that leads to the question of how do you resist? Right? And again, that's a very important question, I think, for all of us even now. And the description you get is you resist with the power of conscience, with the power of a certain sense of rooting in yourself. As one of the, I think I should just read what, since I have, unlike you, made some notes and came, I should read some of what is there in the book itself. This is one of the Britishers who Gandhi is opposing. He says it is impossible not to admire the man, for it is evident that he recognizes no court of appeal except that of his own conscience. Right? So again, you see how the Mahatma is made in terms of the fact that you're listening to your inner voice. And if you listen to your inner voice strongly enough, the world will listen to you. And I think that's the kind of a Gandhian viewpoint you get from this. The other point which again you always wonder about is what was the secret of his charisma? And again, the description you get, he's not a great speaker. He can speak in a certain kind of monotone as it were. So in a sense, there's a way in which life is a message. Again, that's a very interesting point in our times as well, where you don't necessarily have the link between speech and action. And Gandhi embodied the link between speech and action. And again, as Ram says, and yet the Indians who heard him listened, because even if the tone was unvaried, the words carried conviction. Gandhi inspired devotion, not so much by his articles or speeches, as by the exemplary nature of his life and conduct. So again, how do we bridge that gap between what we say and what we do? And I think the embodiment of that is really Gandhi in terms of the way he comes across in this book. And perhaps the last point which I'll make, and maybe we can open it out, is why you should read again the two books, is the idea that Gandhi means a lot for the contemporary world we live in, for a range of domains in which we engage in. And I have one example which I actually end up discussing with Ram quite often, which is the question of food. Because I'm a runner, and so when I go running in Coven Park, then you engage with a range of people. Because you're running, you don't necessarily think in terms of politics, but you're talking to someone, and the person, you get a sense, is maybe politically divergent from where you are. And so the discussions you have, again, runners are very interested in the food they have and how food is very important to the way the body changes, etc. And my point to this runner chap is that the book you need to go back to is Gandhi, because he documents in great detail. Again, you read volume 2 and volume 1, the diet he follows, the range of diaries when he talks about eating 10 peanuts or 2 oranges or whatever else it might be. And the point which again Ram makes in terms of the book by Nico Slate is the question of diet. Again, look at the contemporary world, right? I mean, the way people respond to the challenges we have. One way you respond to it is to say, hey, I'm delinking from the world. I will lead my life. I will consume less. I will lead an exemplary life. Full stop. But the Gandhian point, my understanding, is how my life can be an inspiration for you to change your life. So the way of the politics of food is linked to a larger politics, as it were. So again, Gandhi is an inspiration in helping you think through the notion of the link between the personal and the larger political. And I think the question, the challenge to all of us is those of us who say that, hey, I'm delinking from the world, I'm leading a simple life, and that's what I need to do. The Gandhian answer, my reading, is to say that's not enough. Your idea has to be how you change or transform the world, or the years that change the world. And that's the way you need to think about how you engage with the world that you live in. And I think the final point that I wanted to make is the Yeah, the question of the collected works, again, the question of the silences you mentioned, again, the thought which you go back to, is we're very lucky that Gandhi had 97 volumes and his work was documented. And I was thinking of the comparison. I think Nehru's selected works is 50 plus, 100 volumes. Ambedkar's 23. And not because he didn't write as much, but because he didn't have, right?
It's not so
The people documenting everything he said, everything he did. So that's a gap we have. So there's a range of, I think, other thinkers as well, who I'm sure will be equally fascinating, but we don't have that range of literature around their lives, as it were. And of course, many more thoughts in terms of the question of the biography as well, and your point about how one does a biography. And I thought that's again very fascinating in terms of the account of, how you go about writing a biography. And a contemporary writer who I think, again, I found very fascinating. Again, this is the point I want to make. Actually, Ram's inspiration has been to a range of people doing the work of biography of thinkers in recent times. You go to any book which is published recently, the biography of Dadabhai Naoroji, there's a blurb given by Ram. Or a book on the Tokyo trials, there's a blurb given by Ram. So what he's done actually is encourage a range of people to write about the contemporary history of India. So I think apart from all the other work he's done, he's managed to build that sense of an intellectual community by encouraging younger writers and thinkers to come out and publish or write works of key or important figures in the Indian context. I think for that, we really have to thank you for the effort you put in encouraging all of us. Thank you. I think with those short comments, I don't really have a question in particular. We'll open it out in terms of anybody has any thoughts, questions to ask Ram. I will take it forward from there.
Arvind said, I have to ask you this question. So I'm asking you this question, Ram. He said, he wanted to know whether that Gandhi came to Bangalore in 1915.
Yeah.
And we found out, we're writing a book on the history of RBNMS, and we found out that he actually came to RBNMS. There was a public meeting at RBNMS in 1915. In your research, did you come across his visit to Bangalore in 1915 and why he was here?
No, he mainly came, of course, he'd just come back from South Africa. And he had been told by his mentor Gokhale that to spend a year traveling around and not make any political statements because he'd been away for so long and of course he had to get to know his country. So he came to South India and of course Gokhale died in between. And the principal reason for his visit to Bangalore in 1915 was to unveil a statue of Gokhale in what is now the Gokhale Institute of Public Affairs in Baswantagudi. I mean, not very active now, but once upon a time very active. I mean, there was a follower of Gokhale called D.V. Gundapal, celebrated Kannada writer, and was involved in that. So he came really for that, and he had been in Tamil Nadu, and I'm sure RBNMS, the same kind of liberal reformist sensibility as Gokhale and the servants of Indian society. That's probably the reason they would have brought him here too. I mean, he came to Bangalore again in the 1920s, the 1930s. In 20s and 30s, he usually stayed at the Kumarappa guest house, and which is still there. And during the Bangalore Literature Festival, when a friend is there from out of town, I generally take them there to show them because they don't know that there's a Gandhi site there. But it was part of his All India tour, and the unveiling of the Gokhale portrait in an institute named after him was the principal reason he came. Yeah.
How did you deal with Gandhi's works, particularly in Gujarati, for your research? And particularly Ambedkar criticized saying Gandhi wrote some polar opposites. Yeah. Do you agree with that? Did you ever come across such?
So that statement of Ambedkar is not accurate. First, that statement is not accurate. I mean, see, I don't want to get into, my new book has a whole chapter on the Gandhi-Ambedkar debate. It's a very complicated thing, and I hugely admire Ambedkar. And by the way, after I wrote this book, several people have come up to me and said, why don't you write on Dr. Ambedkar next? Because actually, if you read this book, please read it, Vinay. Please read second volumes too. You will see there's several chapters on Gandhi and Ambedkar. And you can see how carefully I delineate the debate, both the way it changes and in a way in which I don't disrespect either party. On the Gandhi-Ambedkar thing, I'll come to your first question.
Not
was about
as much about Gandhi-Ambedkar, but whether what led to the
Or
perception
Gujarati.
that
Or
he
Gujarati.
wrote something
No,
else
so
in Gujarati?
on Gandhi and Ambedkar, it's a very, I mean, very briefly, I mean, I could give a whole lecture on this, so I'll let that pass. But on the Gujarati writings, the technical thing. So the Gujarati writings of Gandhi himself are there in the collected works. But Gujarati letters to him, I read Hindi, so some of the Hindi sources I could read myself. I don't read Gujarati. But quite a few of the Gujarati letters quoted in volume 2 were translated for me by a wonderful Gujarati, bilingual Gujarati writer called Urvish Kothari, who is also a very funny satirist on X. You may have seen some of his short videos, but he's actually, so he helped me with the Gujarati letters. Yeah.
Thank you for that lovely talk, so engaging. I was particularly fascinated with your tips about how to write the biography.
Not mine, Professor Nicholas Boyle's. I'll say that.
3
Go
plus
ahead.
1.
Go ahead, yeah.
3 plus 1. But I was just thinking that so far the biographies that you describe is based on meticulous research, documenting, in many ways a proactive activity.
Yeah.
I was just wondering that given the context of how much anti-Gandhi myths are going around, many beliefs, would you consider writing something that would be reactive? Would you defend it?
Yeah. So, very good question. First on those, I'll just, if I may, something on the laws. So when my first volume came out, I wrote an essay in the Financial Times, sort of trying to bring attention to the book, which was on the laws of biography, which are called Boy's Laws. Now, apparently, within the Financial Times, it came out in the weekend section as the lead essay. It was so attracted the admiration of the editor, whom I did not know. It was commissioned by, the arts and features editor, that the editor sent it to everyone in the newspaper saying, great, this is how you should write. However, Professor Nicholas Boyle was so angry with me, he refused to answer my letters. Because he's a reclusive scholar who didn't want his name in the press and satirized like Boyle's Laws. And I wrote him 2 or 3 mails, he didn't reply. And Sujata, my wife, who knew him from Berlin, said, you should have understood, He's a careful, reclusive scholar, and it took him years to forgive me. And the last time I met him in Cambridge, I said, I'm working on this book on the collected works, and do I have my permission to dedicate it to you? And he agreed. So there's a happy ending. But this is a story about different kinds of scholars. And I think the Boyle kind of scholar is, I think, the most admirable, the greatest rectitude, devotion to scholarship, and the least talked about in the world of Instagram and X and Facebook and all of that. Right? But your other question about, just remind me of the question you asked.
About writing in reactive.
Yeah, reactive. So the book I've finished now, which will come out, is kind of a response to all the criticisms. So there is a section on Marxist criticisms of Gandhi. When I was a doctoral student in the early 80s, when Hindutva was not there, the BJP had got 2 seats in the 1980 elections. The most vicious critiques of Gandhi came from the Marxists. The Naxalites particularly. I have documented in a new book some of that. In 1969, during the Gandhi centenary, Naxalites in eastern India, the police reports document some 150 incidents of Naxalites defacing pictures and statues of Gandhi. And now, of course, is the right. So I've talked about that too. I've talked about both the Hindu rights critique of Gandhi while he was alive. So there's discussion of Savarkar, there's a discussion of Golwalkar, there's a discussion of also Godse and Godse's speech, which is a very interesting document, which must be taken seriously. Coming down to the present, coming down to the, the present. And also there's a section on the Prime Minister and Gandhi, who's more ambivalent. His real feelings about Gandhi don't come out because he knows of Gandhi's position in the world. But then there's the Ambedkarite critique, I talk about that. There's the modernist economist critique. There's the argument that Gandhi was a racist, which Arvind alluded to. The capacity of friendship, but he did not have a single African friend. And some of his early remarks are racist. But he grew. So if you look at the character verse carefully, rather than quote it out of context, you can see that. Then the whole issue of what kind of influence did he have in Africa? Why did the ANC give up non-violence and take to violence? All that is discussed. Feminism and the feminist critique of Gandhi. So, but it's a book. It's not a defense counsel's defense of Gandhi. You know, obviously I am broadly sympathetic to Gandhi, but there are places in which I can see the problems work. It's a delineation of all the different arguments about him and the critics of him, and so my new book will answer some of this. But I am a qualified admirer of Gandhi. That's how I would put myself. I mean, I'm also greatly admire Ambedkar. One of the really, to go back to Vinay's point, you know, one of the really pernicious aspects of our debate today is you're asked to choose between Ambedkar and Gandhi. And the people who have taught us not that you don't have to choose are actually Kannada writers. You know, the late Siddhalangaya, the late D.R. Nagaraj, and a person who's still with us, Devanur Mahadeva, you know, who have showed us, and I wish the Ambedkarites, you know, would recognize that. No upper caste Hindu did more to challenge untouchability than Gandhi. No, he was calling it a sin in 1919. He was saying the Hindus who practice untouchability are the general dyers of Hinduism. I mean, initially he didn't oppose the caste system, but that also he changed. So I think it's a lot of misconceptions about it. Ambedkar is a truly great man. I mean, there's no question about. I'll tell you a Mahadeva story, if I may. You know, the first time I saw Mahadeva was in, which is just a story which tells you the kind of whole dynamic of this extraordinary encounter between Ambedkar and Gandhi. So Mahadeva recently has been talking about why we need to bring Ambedkar and Gandhi together. But the first time I saw him was in 1994, which was in a meeting in Manipal. And it was a meeting on the 125th anniversary of Gandhi. It was convened by the esteemed Kannada writer U.R. Anantamurthy. In those days, used to teach at Manipal. And there was this conference, 3-day conference on Gandhi, 125th anniversary. You know, scholars from all around India spoke on Gandhi and his message and his different dimensions of his work. And Mahadeva spoke on the last day. Everyone else spoke in English. And Mahadeva spoke in Kannada. And I think D.R. Nagaraj or possibly Anandamurthy was translating him. So I'm telling you, because I don't know Kannada, I'm telling you what was said. He was said in translation. The whole seminar was against a portrait of Gandhi in his loincloth. Right, there's a big portrait. And Mahadeva said, see, when we see Gandhiji in a loincloth, what do we say? And he used the one Kannada word I could understand because it's from Sanskrit. He said Tyaga, so sacrifice. You know, upper caste man gives up his profession and works for us. But if Ambedkar is shown in a loincloth, what will we say? He will say he's a Harijan, what else will we wear? And then he read out a poem by a Dalit woman exalting Ambedkar in a suit. Why Ambedkar must be represented in a suit? Because Ambedkar is not supposed to wear a suit. Nothing in biography, culture, history shows that. Now, I've written a lot on Gandhi and Ambedkar in this book, 3 chapters. In my new book, 1 large chapter. But often when it comes up, I say, it's such an extraordinary relationship. A mere historian or biographer cannot do it justice. And I've said this in public very often. And I'm saying it again here. It has nothing to do with the presence of a certain friend of mine in the audience. I've often said only Vijay Tendulkar or Girish Karnad could have done justice to that.
Actually, Mahatma Gandhi told us that untouchability, those who practice untouchability are general dyers.
Yeah.
In Vaikam to that Nambudiri who actually was a hurdle for Elavas to enter the Shiva temple. Yeah. That was when I went to Vaikam with Mahadeva sir, I noticed this. My question is this, that you said that you were renewed interest in Gandhi started somewhere around 1978. And that is the exact time when Lankesh also felt so. Lankesh has written about this, that during emergency, all of them felt that Gandhi is like a weapon against the authoritarianism, and everybody is having a Gandhi photo in front of them in Satyagraha against the emergency or the authoritarianism on that day. But now you see that the Constitution preamble is a sort of a weapon or the tool to protest. why is it that Gandhi is not again such a symbol against the authoritarianism?
So,
now?
I mean, against authoritarianism per se, I mean, obviously the preamble, but if you go back to the CAA protest, Gandhi and Ambedkar were both there. No. Gandhi and Ambedkar were both there. The CAA protest, you will see the slogans, the posters held up in Delhi and other places, even in Bangalore. And also something very interesting. The day both of us the day both of us were detained was 19 December 2019. You know why 19 December was chosen? No. Yeah, there's only one reason. You know the second reason? Exactly. Exactly. The Mewati Muslims who were fleeing. So it brought together not only Gandhi and Ambedkar, Gandhi and Bhagat Singh. So actually, I don't want to get into contemporary politics. This is a lecture about the biographer's art. But today, some of these false polarizations, some are real. Gandhi versus Savarkar is real. But if we want to resist authoritarian majoritarianism, infighting, we can draw something from Ambedkar, something from Gandhi, something from Nehru, something from Kamala Devi, something. So I think that's where I think that those CA protests are very interesting because the juxtaposition of 2 days. Anyway, that's yeah.
Okay, now you mentioned, that you've written about about Gandhi's how he changed, and he was not so racist later on.
Yeah.
So can you mention?
Yeah. So there's a full chapter in my book, so you'll have to wait for that. But it's described in detail. So very briefly, the greatness of Gandhi is linked to his cultivating of friendship and talking and listening. The willingness to learn, listen, and change. So if you look at his views on caste, he's gradually evolving from saying, he starts says untouchability is bad, but intermarriage I'm not sure, to ending by saying, I will only solemnize a marriage if it is between a Dalit and a Brahmin. With race likewise. So he goes in the course of his life, and that is traced in my next book, from being a racist to being a non-racist to being an anti-racist. And that's it. And you see, if you're an ideologue, you cherry pick. You take one quote from the collected works and leave out the rest. The greatest of the collected works was in the spirit of Gandhi's commitment to truth. Everything of Gandhi is there, including the strangest, most bizarre, most peculiar, most offensive remarks he made. But he's always evolving. I mean, the moral evolution of Gandhi with regard to his views on women, caste and race are very clear if you carefully look at it. And in my new book, I do some of that. Yeah. But other people made him change. It was not as Ambedkar made him more radical when it came to caste. Kamala Devi made him more radical when it came to gender. So, there are other people who are his interlocutors who are pushing him, and he's listening to them and changing. Yeah.
ಆ್ಯಕ್ಚುಲಿ 1927 27 ಬಾಬಾ ಸಾಹೇಬ್ ಬಿ ಅಂಬೇಡ್ಕರ್ ಅವರು ಮಹಾಡ್ ಸತ್ಯಾಗ್ರಹ ನಡೆಸ್ತಾರೆ. 1913 ಗಾಂಧೀಜಿಯವರು ಸಾಲ್ಟ್ ಮಾರ್ಚ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಸಾಲ್ಟ್ ಮಾರ್ಚ್ ಭಾಳ ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ಅಂತ ಅನಿಸಿದ ಗಾಂಧೀಜಿಗೆ ನೀರನ್ನು ಮುಟ್ಟೋ ಪರ್ಮಿಷನ್ ಇರಲಿಲ್ಲ ಇಂಡಿಯಾದಲ್ಲಿ. ನೀರಿನ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತಾಡಬೇಕಂತ ಯಾಕೆ ಗಾಂಧಿಗೆ ಅನಿಸಿರಲಿಲ್ಲ?
The answer to that is we shouldn't expect one person to do everything. If I was to ask you, why didn't Ambedkar take the Hindutva and the demonization of Muslims seriously? Would that be fair? No. You understand? Right. So I think this whole mode of argument, why did he not do this? Rather, what did he do and what did others do? Do we judge his life against his time? From the perspective of 1927, what could Ambedkar do? What could Gandhi do? So this whole, what has happened is, I'll tell you the background to this briefly. And we are talking a great deal about Ambedkar and Gandhi. Maybe after this we can get on to other topics. You see, there was a time when Ambedkar was written out of the narrative because he opposed Gandhi and he supported the British. Now, he had a good reason to oppose Gandhi because he had experienced discrimination, oppression himself. So, he understood it much more actively. Had also possibly a good reason to support the British because British rule actually opened up spaces for Dalits. But he was demonized and kept out. Today, he is excessively valorized. It is as Ambedkar has the answers to everything. Ambedkar himself said, hero worship, bhakti or hero worship is the route to dictatorship. Don't make a cult of Ambedkar. Don't make a cult of Gandhi. That's how I would put it. So I think this Gandhi, Ambedkar, like Mahadeva is, that's why we should learn from Mahadeva, how can we bring both of them together? I mean, he's written some beautiful things on, and of course, D.R. Nagaraj's book, The Flaming Feet. So, yes, I mean, but that is not, by the way, it's not true that Gandhi did not talk about water. His writings consistently say access to public wells. In fact, he opened wells to Harijans in the early 30s. They were not followed up because his followers did not, were not. In the whole Congress, only Gandhi was fighting against untouchability full time. Patel was not interested. Nehru was influenced by Marx, so he thought class is more important than caste. But Gandhi does talk about it. If you read his speeches in the early 30s, access to schools, access to public wells, public roads is also part of what he's saying.
ಮತ್ತೆ ಮತ್ತೆ ಸವಿಯಬೇಕೆನಿಸುವ ಮೃದುವಾದ ನಂದಿನಿ ಪನ್ನೀರ್.
Sir, Winston Churchill was a strong critic of Mr. Gandhi. So
Who?
Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill.
Yeah.
So how do you?
Yeah, that is a standard imperialist criticism. I mean, it's there in my second volume. Because Winston Churchill did not want freedom for India. He said Hindus are a beastly people with a beastly religion. No, those were his remarks. And he actually thought when Gandhi was on fast in 1943, he was happy for Gandhi to die. That's a standard imperialist criticism. I mean, it's not really very interesting. I mean, so in my new book, I don't talk about it because it's not really. Any questions on the back, maybe?
Hello, sir. Thank you for the talk. So my question is for concerning younger generation, people of my age and those younger than me, those of us who still look up to Gandhi. How do we put across his message in a manner that doesn't get us attacked per se? And also, what do we do when all we receive is gifs of Nathuram with fire eyes and stuff like that?
What is that? The last part I didn't get.
GIFs, if I say something positive about on Gandhi Jayanti, celebrating him, in response to in the comment section, we receive a image of Godse with laser eyes and stuff.
So the thing is, X and Instagram are enemies of nuance and subtlety. You can distort it, take anything out of context, right? That's inevitable, and of course, Godse trends. I think something very interesting. A friend pointed this out to me in my new book. Godse trends on 30th January. But no one knows the day on which Godse was born. So Godse is only identified by killing Gandhi. Bhagat Singh and Gandhi are celebrated both on the day they were born and the day they died. That's quite interesting. So it's a visceral hatred of the. Now, I should just say one last thing. My 2 volumes are being made into a web series, directed by Hansal Mehta, starring Pratik Gandhi. And I've seen the early rushes. They're good. I mean, when I was persuaded to sell the rights, I said, embellish but don't falsify. The film is a different medium. So maybe through that I humanized him. So maybe through that, more people will. Yeah, but it's hard for me to, I suppose, how do you get. But again, you see, as I said, I mean, one has to find a way. I mean, I have spent all these years with Gandhi, but I don't regard Gandhi, to go back to all the questions, I regard Tagore and Ambedkar as fully as interesting and fascinating as Gandhi. I might still write something on Ambedkar, not a biography, but something else. I've written essays on Tagore. I can't write a book on Tagore because I don't know Bangla, right? But I would say they are all, I mean, my book Makers on Modern India has, 19 people. So Phule, Periyar, Tagore, Gandhi, Nehru, Ambedkar, Kamala Devi, they all are quite extraordinarily interesting people. And I mean, a kind of a recovery of the democratic and plural fabric of the republic can't just take one person. Has to take these collective efforts, and we know who is against it, what is against it. We know what, and to me it is, of course, the Hindu right, but also the Maoist left. I mean, I have never been had any sympathy for the Naxalites, but of course the real danger is from the Maoist left, right? So I beg your pardon, from the Hindu right. So we should, but all these people, so this kind of, so how, of course, and I think you can't make a Godse admirer today love Gandhi. That's impossible, right? But I think the Ambedkarites and the feminists, I think they have to, I think, it's important. I think the bridges between Gandhi and Ambedkar are crucial. And I think that's, if you're looking at citizens' action, I mean, I'm not an activist, I'm a writer. But I think to find a way of not treating them today as adversaries. Maybe they debated in the 30s and maybe they had their disagreements in the 30s. But I think that is something which I feel very, very strongly about. And as I said, it's very interesting that Karnataka is the one place where the intellectuals of at least Mahadeva and Nagaraj's generation realized that demonizing Gandhi, vilifying Gandhi, would only play into the hands of the Hindutvawadis.
Ram, can you say a little bit about the relationship between Gandhi and Tagore, since you mentioned Tagore?
Yeah.
Was there Gandhi and Ambedkar has been discussed a lot,
Yeah.
but what was that like?
So that's a great, it's a great topic, possibly for a whole book. So Gandhi and Tagore had a very interesting, complicated relationship, affectionate, rivalrous, disputatious, but broadly undergirded by mutual regard. And they disagreed on nationalism. And Gandhi, to his credit, the famous statement of Gandhi, which may even be in schools in Bangalore, that the windows of my house are not walled in, and etc. I welcome in all the winds, but I will not be blown off by any. The first line of that statement is never used. It is, I hope I am as great a believer in free air as the poet. Now that statement came at the end of a debate extending over 2 years, in which Gandhi started as a xenophobe. Gandhi said something which he later came to recant, unlike other Gujarati politicians who keep on making those kinds of statements. He said, Ram Mohan Roy and Bal Gangadhar Tilak were pygmies for writing in English. And basically Tagore took the pants off him. He wrote a brilliant critique where he pointed out that, you have to look at the world outside, and, as Tagore was to famously say in another context, we must glory in the illumination of a candle lit anywhere in the world. And then Gandhi opened it. He recognized he had gone too far. Then they disagreed about the charkha. But then they agreed about many things. And they had a wonderful, wonderful friendship. There's a great book called The Mahatma and the Poet, which has the letters between Gandhi and Tagore. Now, the issue with that book is that it is published by the National Book Trust, which means every Indian can afford it and no Indian can see it. So that's really what it is. But it's a first, again, I think Vijay Pataki and his troupe in Bangalore have done a play about Gandhi and Tagore. So I think a book on Gandhi and, they're extraordinarily fascinating relationship. Some of the relationship is also traced in Gopal Krishna Gandhi's edited volume, A Frank Friendship, which is about, my new book, Speaking with Nature, has a photograph of Gandhi and Tagore on the cover because that's Gandhi's last visit. But, there's some things in which Gandhi is much greater than Tagore. So, on the other hand, some issues in which Tagore was a visionary. So when Gandhi comes back, he goes to Shantiniketan. And he finds that in Phoenix, everyone does their own hard work and dirty work. But the other students have other people to do all their cleaning and so. So he says, how do you break down caste barriers by making Brahmins also doing manual work? That's a very revolutionary act of Gandhi. So it's a fascinating relationship. I'll say one thing about Tagore, one last thing about Tagore. Unfortunately, Ravi Shankar says this, not the lesser Ravi Shankar who lives somewhere close to us, but the great sitar player Ravi Shankar. He says that, we Bengalis have held Tagore so close to our heart, that we've not let the rest of the world recognize his greatness. And I think that's true of the rest of India too. So this Tagore-Gandhi debate, you're right. It's just, I wish that book, The Mahatma and the Poet, was more widely available. By the way, one last thing. So that long before The Mahatma and the Poet came out, Navajivan Press, which was Gandhi's publisher, edited a very interesting volume, brought out a very interesting volume, edited by R.K. Prabhu, who was a journalist from Canara, in fact, from Karnataka, interested in Gandhi. And it doesn't have all the letters, unlike Mahatma and the Poet, Mahatma and the Poet was edited by Sabyasachi Bhattacharya, who was a JNU professor. R.K. Prabhu has about 60% of the letters. But in 1959 it came out, Navjeevan Press. Again, 3 rupees, can't get it. I bought it in A.H. Wheeler in some railway station. But the title of that collection is fascinating. It's called Truth Called Them Differently. I think that's, with Ambedkar, Ambedkar and Gandhi, I would say justice called them differently. Both were committed to justice, but I think that's, But that lovely title, Truth Called Them Differently. Thank you.
ಮತ್ತಷ್ಟು ವಿಶೇಷ ವಿಡಿಯೋಗಳನ್ನು ನೋಡಲು ಮತ್ತು ಹೊಸ ವಿಡಿಯೋಗಳ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ತಿಳಿಯಲು
ಈ ದಿನ .com ಯೂಟ್ಯೂಬ್ ಚಾನೆಲ್ ಸಬ್ಸ್ಕ್ರೈಬ್ ಮಾಡಿ
ಮತ್ತು ಬೆಲ್ ಐಕಾನ್ ಕ್ಲಿಕ್ ಮಾಡಿ.